Hello, everyone. Welcome to Power to Fly. Welcome to my living room. I am Katie Mason here, and I have Ngoc here with us. We're at the Power to Fly Chat and Learn. I want to just talk through some of the guidelines for using the platform here. If you're here in the live chat, there's the Q&A that you can take a look. We have prepared questions for. So. There's a DM that if you want to chat to us anonymously, and of course this is being recorded, and you can come back to rewatch this, and tag us on social if you feel like you want to share some gems as we talk this hour. And so for me, I am your conversation facilitator. I'm here to elevate the voices of women of color in first gen, and I love having these conversations on life and career alignment talks. And I practice empathy wherever I go. And you can find me at Modern Chi and also on LinkedIn to see if you want to host your next office hour with me. And of course, I have to introduce my featured guest, Nakto, who is Senior Product Manager at Twitch, who's here to talk with us about life and career in product management. Ngoc, I'm going to pass the mic to you so that you can tell us more about yourself. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Katie. And I'm very honored to be here and to share my experience with everyone. So, a little bit about myself. I'm currently a senior product manager at Twitch. And prior to Twitch, I was at Adobe working on video editing tools. And prior to that, I did my MBA at UCLA. And that's when because of my MBA, I came to the US. So I've been in the US for only 6 years now. And when I got your outreach email to share about the experience, especially for minor community and people in tech, I'm very interested and I want to share my experience. And who comes here from another country and now work in tech in a lot of companies that are very diverse and support diversity and inclusivity. So for my product experience, a lot of times I feel like I'm the only woman and also the only minority person in the room. So I want to do the best that I can to bring in more diverse voices in the room, and especially when we're building products for a very diverse range of customers, and because our customers are based worldwide. It's really important for us to consider perspectives from multiple background and experiences.
Amazing. And let me just go through some of the themes. Ngoc and she has shared with me, these are the things that we would be talking about, and hopefully we get to all of them. So why is PM a rewarding job, and why do tech companies need them? The responsibilities of the PM and the differences between working at a startup versus a big corp. Also some key challenges, workload, stakeholder management, machine learning, AI, and product, which are her passions, and also how to get into PM without technical background, and the ideal candidates, some of the ideas that she can share with us from her experience seeing transition into this role. And of course, we're here. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Let me just exit out of this screen so that we can just start talking. Between the two of us. Okay, great, awesome. So the first question is, can you give us a broad overview of your definition of the PM for someone who doesn't know anything about it?
Yes, and yeah, that's a very interesting question because I think if you ask different people about product management, people might have different definitions as well, and the term product management can vary from one company to another. But I think there's a common theme, and that the similarities across different PM roles in different companies. And it is that PM is the connection between the customers. like is the connection between the market and then the product of the company. So that's why all companies need a PM as they are building out products with a customer centric focus. And for in a PM role, like, there's going to be multiple components. So there's going to be some like all like kind of theme, like from people working more on the vision, on the strategy side, thinking about how we can build the product in the short term and long term, to achieve the vision and the mission of the company. And then PM also have to do the execution part, like how we can take that vision and turn it into reality. So depending on the company, a PM can work more on one part or another, or it can find a balance between. So there are some companies where PM will like focus more on the vision and then thinking about the strategy and the roadmap of the product. And some companies, PM more like focus on the execution of how we actually execute ideas and make sure that stakeholders are aligned and we can launch the product to the market. So yeah, that's kind of like my summary and my thinking of it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just gathering that there's like sort of someone who may be more focused on the roadmap and strategy, but then another PM may be more focused on execution of delivery.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be two
Mm-hmm.
different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just really depends on the company. So
Mm-hmm.
because PM works with a variety of stakeholders, so usually the key stakeholders that PMs work with are design, engineer, um, program manager or project manager, like the people who make sure like in terms of operation and timeline. And then there's also like other business partners considering like finance, marketing, legal, that we need to work with, right? So in some cases, when we are focusing more on the vision and the strategy, we definitely need to take into account the perspective from all these stakeholders. But when we look at the execution, there are some teams that kind of like lean a little bit more on the program managers to take the project and the product throughout different milestone, because they focus more on the operations part, while PM can lean back and then focus more on the vision and see like, oh, what else can we do, what else can we build in the next phase after this launch. So I think that just like really depends on the nature of the team and the nature of the product as well. Um, but they're definitely like I think in a lot of team it's hard to have a 50-50% between both. So something can be like 40% vision, 60% execution, or like vice versa, depending on the company, for and the product.
Wonderful. Moving on to the next one, it would be for you. How has product management been rewarding and challenging for you both?
Yeah, so for me, I really like building product or working on something from scratch. So reflecting on my past experience, I've done a lot of project from like conceptualization to launch and then like iteration and improvement. So I really enjoy that part. And when I was looking at my next step in my career a few years ago, I wanted to find something that I can work on from scratch and build things and deliver it to the market, but not like, but also have a lot of influence in like how the product gets built. So that's when I found out about product management, and then the product manager career track. And I think that's kind of like a good summary of how, like, as product manager, I think the most rewarding part is to see the fruit of your labor, like to really see something that you think about for so long and bring so many people together to work on the same thing, and then finally launch it to the market and then experience and uh, customers feedback, like the positive thing as well as the negative thing that you can improve in the future, and kind of just see how the product grows and develops in the future.
Mhm. That's wonderful. I feel like you are also just nurturing and seeing how something develops, and then being able to continue to have an impact in the future of how it will, where it will go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the challenging, the rewarding part, but also very challenging, right? Because it's challenging because when you're working on something new from scratch, there are a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of ambiguity around the problem that you're working with. uh, because not that there's not really like similar problems to that before. So there's a lot of thinking that has to go into it, and because we're working with a lot of people, right? Like as a product manager, we don't like, directly build things, but we influence people and other
Mhm.
stakeholders that we work with, and get them to work with us to build something. So getting alignment across different people and make sure that they can also understand and get on board with the vision that we have about the product is really important. And I think that the challenging part is that something we do test things and we don't know if it works or not. But then there's also the approach that's why like uses a lot of experiment to validate hypothesis and to make sure that before we launch something, we test it and know that it will have a chance to succeed in the future.
Mhm. Great. And also, this role has been an expansion. Is that what you've been seeing, and that there's more specification, perhaps, in being a PM in different companies, like you mentioned before?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like there's been like some changes in the PM world in terms of requirements for the job as well. So I think like 5 6 years ago, the PM job is mostly technical, and does require somebody with the technical skills to get into the PM role, because we have to work directly with engineers and have to be very technical about the product. But I think that mindset has shifted in the past few years as the PM role get expanded and to become a more important role in the business as well. The PM definitely has a stronger say in the vision and then the roadmap and the direction of the company than before. So that's why there are more people who can get into PM without a technical background. So it doesn't have to. It doesn't mean that like as a PM we don't really need to have technical background, but we don't need to be like a prior software engineer or somebody with a CS or computer science degree to be a good PM, because PM requires a lot more different skills than the technical coding part, where we can rely on engineers to do that work.
Great. Of course, I want to hear from you about what you see as the differences working in a startup versus a big corporation.
Yes. So in my past experience, I worked at a startup and I was like their seventh team member, and I built out a team. So the PM job that I did back then was very different from what I'm doing right now, especially when in such a small team and in such a small company. A PM has to do a lot more things than a PM at a big company. So just imagine a team with much less resources. A PM has to wear more hats. Will have to do a lot more things besides just focusing on thinking about vision, roadmap, talking to customers. We also basically have to do more like in terms of user research, survey, instead of having the support of a research team that we can get at a big company. So the level of resources is very different between a startup and a corporation. But also in terms of flexibility, a PM at a startup will definitely have more flexibility in terms of what I want to work on, right? So um, it is more like within kind of my control to think about what I want to do, and what kind of area that I think I can focus on in the next few years. But in a big corporation, there's some defined charter, and then each PM in the same team can work on a different vertical or horizontal of the product depending on like the team resource and the direction of the director or like the manager of the team, right? So I think in a startup, being a PM will require not just pure PM skills, but also a lot of other things that we need to do at the side in order to execute a job. But in a big corporation, there are a lot of resources, so we have to learn how to use the resources efficiently, how we can leverage all of the resources to work in our favor. And navigating the resources in a big corporation is also not an easy task. And make sure that people are on board when especially different teams and departments have different priorities and interests as well.
Okay, and I dropped in the contact information for us just in case anyone wants to reach out.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, I want to ask about like stepping into the details of the role. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the workload and the stakeholder management? Do you find that you have to explain technical constraints to non-technical stakeholders?
Yes. In my day-to-day job, I interact with four key stakeholders. My designer, who's a very close partner that I work with and brainstorm ideas and think about customer experience and the UI in the product that we want to show to our customers. And then my designer and engineer managers who lead the engineering team that I work with. And the engineering manager is like a very close person who will think about how he can better allocate the resources in the month to work on different projects that I have in the roadmap and make sure that we can meet the timeline. And I also get the help in terms of planning with my program manager, who's the person who's really focusing on the milestones and look at the stakeholders and in external teams to make sure that we don't miss out on anyone. And this is something that only big corporations will have this problem when we have like 100 teams with different charters, and when we do something, it might impact other teams as well. So the program manager's job is really to look at like, oh, will this feature impact other teams, and what we need to do to talk to the other teams, or what do we need to do to make sure that they align and aware of what we are doing. Um, and then the last but not least partner is the marketing manager. So it's the product marketing manager who's in charge of the communications to our customers in terms of the product we are launching. So the marketing partner has to be involved from the very beginning of any project, has to be part of the conceptualization of the product or the feature that I work on, so that they know based on their experience and insight of the market whether we are going the right direction or not. And then toward the end of the product or near the launch of the feature, they will be the person and make sure like, they can craft the right messaging, the right communication, so that our customers can understand the value of the product and the feature, and customers are aware that we are launching this new thing or updating or giving improvements to the feature so that they can get in and try and use it.
Mhm. From what I'm gathering, I hear it's you have your designer, your engineer manager, and then also the program manager and the marketing
Right.
person. Those are the four main people that you connect with almost every day.
Right. Those are more like day-to-day partners, right? But a PM job, we also have to look at when we launch a feature or a product, there are definitely some financial impact to the company, right? We also need to evaluate what what potential revenue that this new feature can bring to the company, or what would be like some potential budget that we need to spend in order to make sure that this feature is a success. So I also need to work with the finance team in terms of budgeting and forecasting for revenue and financial impact. And besides that, we have products that deals with a lot of different types of customers. So we also have to look at the legal aspect of it, especially for Twitch. As you know, we have a very diverse range of viewers, and from my side of product, I work on monetization and ads. There are also like regulation and there are specific terms and legal issues that we have to deal with. And we have to make sure that our creators is well protected, but also like from our side, we're not violating any regulation and terms. So we also need to double check things with legal, and looking a little bit broadly, stakeholders, meaning that the teams that the feature or product that I might have to interact with. So as one big product, there's no component that works individually or separately without impact to others. So even though I work on monetization, I will still need to, when I launch a feature, for example, when on the streaming side, right? So we also have to check with other teams on the creator side or on the viewer side to see if that feature has any impact on their roadmap or anything that they're aware of. So those are more like external stakeholders outside of day-to-day work, but I have to keep them in mind to make sure that I involve them whenever I need.
Yeah, and this question may be connected or not. You can let me know. But do you find that you are able to see results quickly and be able to make decisions that have impact?
When we talk about result, are we referring to launch or experiment?
Sure. Yeah. How? What's like the time frame that for you when you kind of make a decision to implement something and then see it come into play, where you see it inside the platform happening in real life?
Yeah, so for any product launch, we would have to go through a long process of product development and might run a few experiments to validate hypothesis and test whether we have the right user experience, whether we have uh, the right structure of the any program in place, right? So really depends on the size and the scale of the feature that we want to launch. That whether we can do the execution quickly or not. But usually, in a big company, it will take a longer time than smaller companies to get things out of the door. So at a startup, like people can like just test and iterate a lot faster. Also because we have like at a startup, they have less like a smaller user base, so the impact might be smaller, and then they can test a lot more things. But at a bigger corporation, whenever we launch something or we experiment things, it's usually with a bigger base, and the impact might be a lot bigger than we expected, even if it's not in terms of the experiment itself, but it can impact like the communication or the perception that the community has about us. So any approach in terms of experiment has to be done or has to be carefully considered before we launch it. In, so for things that takes a while to launch, um, we just kind of like had to break it down in terms of smaller experiment and see what kind of signal we can get before the launch. We can get data to inform the decision that we know for the launch we are like there at the point where this will be a successful launch. um, and going back to your question just about like how quickly I can see the impact of the decision. So there are multiple decisions that a PM has to make day in, day out. But the impact of it that we can see is doesn't have always to be in the final product, right? Sometimes it's just like some decision that we make during a meeting that can help accelerate the process or can help unblock the team to move forward. So the decision in terms of like, what the team should work on for this sprint. So it's in terms of prioritization. Can we look at it from the perspective that we can help unblock the team on this part and then we can move forward? So also like about making decisions that can help increase the flexibility and efficiency in the team as well. So sometimes it's not always a decision just about the product and launch, but also about the stakeholders and the processes that I'm working with.
Hmm. Amazing. I love it. I feel like I'm hearing that you can just like go with sometimes your instinct and ask the questions to the group, like, are we doing this in the right way, and can we just maybe shift here and there and make changes along the way? That's so cool. And we have Erica who asks about what are some challenges you face when trying to launch a new feature or product. I feel like you did kind of go into that a bit, but if there's anything else that you can add.
Yeah, so when trying to launch a new feature or product, I think like the first step that usually is like the most challenging step is to convince and get other people on board with the idea, like to really explain the reason why we need this new product and this new feature. Why should the company invest the time, effort, and money in this new feature? So it takes a long process to um, think it through and to make sure that, oh, like this feature is worth the investment. So like really looking at the competitive analysis uh, with other products and see if it makes sense. Is there anything out there that already does this? And also, the most important thing is to look and talk to our customers to see if this is something that they will need, or is there any problems that this new feature or product can help solve. So usually when I first or when I think about a new feature or a new product, I just like go out and do an extensive uh, user research together with my researcher, just to really understand like, oh, what kind of problems that this new technology can help solve. And so a lot of times the initial idea that we have on the new feature or new product can change after we got a lot of insight from the customers. um, just because the idea that we had in the beginning can form from the feature or the product um, might not reflect what the customer thinks would be useful for them. So we'll take a few iteration until we lock down on one idea, and then we move forward with that idea. So I think the exploration and then the iteration in the first phase is the most important thing, but also is the most challenging thing, and it's worth taking the time and to look into it and define the right problem and the solution that we want to deliver. And then once that is set, the rest is more like execution, and we can figure out solutions to make sure that we can deliver it to the market.
Okay, great. I hope we were able to answer the question for you. So the audience, like, you can come in and continue to submit more questions. So now I want to switch over to you developing your career further. So, as you progressed along, do you feel like that you have gone to a breadth kind of state or depth where you have specialized in some sub areas within a PM or more PM generalist? How would you describe your current state?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because right now I think I'm not in a stage where I would say that I've developed an expertise in one technical area, because I've changed jobs and I worked on different types of product as well. So I'm trying to develop myself as a more like a full stack PM. So in my first job as a PM, I worked on a recruiting platform. So basically a website to help to connect companies with the talent. So it has a lot of layers in terms of user experience, and then a website is very different from building other things. And then in my second job as a PM at Adobe, I was working on the core product, looking at the very technical part of it, thinking about machine learning and AI technology, how we can turn the technology into some useful features for video editors to make their editing job more efficient, faster, so they can get to the result. Right? So it's a very technical and core part of the product. And now at Twitch, I'm moving to the monetization part, where I don't really have to think as much about the core part of the product, but I have to think about like what kind of product we can build to increase the ability that the company can make money, especially in ads. Which is also another area that can be very technical. But also it gives another perspective to it, because when I was working on a core feature of the product without thinking about monetization, I can just really focusing more on will this product like bring a lot of joy to our customers, and I don't really have to tie all of the features to a revenue number. But in ads, it's really easy to tie things and any initiative to a revenue number. So it kind of shifts my mindset as well as a PM when I think about a feature, and it's easier to see results when working on a monetization product, because we can definitely see the number result quickly. So to your question, if I develop my career that way, I think where I'm now, I'm in the middle of my career where I'm just trying to route down on the skill sets where I can work on the core product and thinking about the product like from the monetization perspective, so that it will help me to have all of the skill sets where I can take my career to the next level.
Mhm. Alrighty. So Of course, we want to ask you about. I think you've mentioned that you've had been passionate about machine learning and AI. Can we touch on that, and can you offer some insights as far as like how do you fulfill the technical requirements for product? Let's see, I may be phrasing the question wrong. What makes a good PM in the machine learning product space? If
Yes.
this is a specific question, so if you're able to, yeah.
Yeah, I got your
Mhm.
the question.
Yeah.
So I think when we discuss about the question and my experience is based on my previous experience at Adobe. And right now, even though I don't work in AI and machine learning features anymore, I'm still very much passionate about it, and still I'm still following the trend in ML and AI technology out there. So for me, I think for a PM working with ML and AI, like there should be some, at least if we don't have any technical background, still like very important to equip ourselves with basic understanding and knowledge about how how we can create an ML model and how we can put it into a product. So having that basic understanding can facilitate the conversation with the data scientist team, with engineering team. So because of AI and ML product can be very technical sometimes. So the ability to follow the conversation is really important. And then things that you don't understand, we can still like ask the engineers or like the data scientists that we work with. Um, but yeah, it just helps to make the job easier when we go into it with some basic understanding. So once I have that understanding, I think another thing, because ML and AI can be very abstract sometimes, so when we have the technology form the research team or like form our data scientist team, we have to think about ways like how can we apply this to our customers. So it's always best to start from the customer needs and the customer problems first, and see like, oh, so among those technologies, what would be the best solution to solve here. And then sometimes with the same customer problems, the most efficient way doesn't have to be AI and ML. There can be like less expensive and more efficient solution to solve the problem quickly. But if sometimes we also have to question like, is this solution long term, short term? So if there's a short term solution, then go for it. But then if AI and ML can help solve a problem in the long term, then it's also like about the trade off. Like question that I mentioned before, like looking at like the budget and then the investment and the return on investment when we look at AI. And another thing with the machine learning and AI features or technology is that it can take a lot longer than other type of feature that we want to launch. So let's say if you just work on one part of the UI, it's really easy to iterate on the UI and then release and test and get the result and to implement. But with an machine learning and AI feature, usually the technology behind it takes really long time to develop, or like to create a model and then to refine the model and make sure that it works can take a while. So I think having the patience is really important as well, and see what kind of thing that we can prioritize so that we can help guide the research team to make sure that the effort is put in the right part to optimize the model in the right way that can solve the most important part of the customer problems. Um, so I think having all of those skill set, like otherwise, like it's kind of very similar to other PM job as well. It doesn't really have a significant difference or anything. But yeah, I just have to think about it. Having some more like basic knowledge and experience with AI and ML from other things can also be very helpful.
Awesome. I want to go back a little bit. It sounds like you have gotten to the place in your career where you're also really considering and thinking about the keeping the budget in mind, and how, especially in the ad space, how you would the what you're building might help the monetization for the company. Is this something that you feel like you feel very drawn to and you want to continue to have this in your toolkit and moving forward in whatever positions that you might land or aim for in the future?
Are you just talking about AI and ML or the?
I think I'm wanting to step back. I think I missed a follow-up question for the question in terms of the depth or breadth question just prior, where you were saying that you had transitioned from the space where you were building the recruiting website and you went into Adobe where it's more of a core product, and then now you in the ad space, so that this is the place where you have really brought into or thought about more of like budgeting and also thinking about how money plays a big role in what
Mhm.
the product you're trying to build. And so I did miss the question from the last one, where do you think this is something that will be play a big role in how you may think about your next steps that you might take in your position moving forward in PM? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think totally. And especially for senior leadership in product management, they will have responsibility in terms of profit and loss, like P&L of the company. Having the ability to think more about the revenue and really tie all of the metrics to revenue number can kind of help me train myself for that next step, and kind of to make sure that I'm ready when I'm in a position where I really need to be responsible for like to achieve certain revenue target for the company or for a department. Then I already have that kind of like skill set trained throughout my current job.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really important skills that we can build out through our career, even when it's not required at our level.
Mhm. Great. I know. Thanks for working with me on this, because it led me there, because you are also really trying to tell us that AI and ML is not always the solution, but and also that it takes longer, and that you have to, and that is it is more expensive to consider being a part of the product that you're intending to build. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and then when talking about ML and AI, like because it's cool, right? It can do a lot of things, but we also have to always consider whether it's more like for a marketing purpose that we want to say that, oh, this feature is for like it's powered by AI and ML, or is it like really like for the customer benefit, right? So we once we have that very clear distinction or like very clear goal in mind, it can really help the move forward with the product development process.
Mhm. Okay, we let's go to some questions that will help people transition into the PM. From what you're seeing now in your industry, in your field, what does an ideal PM candidate looks like to you?
Yeah, so I worked with a lot of PMs in my experience in my past and current jobs, and I think they're not really like a fixed profile, like a template, like a standard profile for people to break into PM. And that's why I really like it, because there so much diversity in this career track. Like anybody can get in if they're willing to put in work. So for people who don't have any experience, I highly recommend getting some side projects to get the experience. So people like, oh, how can I get this kind of project? How can I get in product management? Like take on some side project is like unpaid, even like side project with yourself. Just try to build out PM experience. So go through on the PM job description. We'll always see some things like, oh, this person must understand customer needs and translate the customer needs to feature and like drive the roadmap, work with multiple stakeholders, right? So that's something that we can do in a side job as well. Like pick a problem that you want to solve and then drive that project, like talk to people, build out something with even with friends or family, um, as something that you can put on the resume or when you can tell to people. So it's definitely a competitive space. So having like side project or internship experience will definitely help people stand out. And I also think now there are a lot of program and trainings that offers PM um, classes. So for people who don't go through like the official MBA track, where it's easier to make the transition, like myself, that I did an MBA, but they can still go through other programs and get the certification, and also like build out the network to break into product management role.
Hmm. We have someone who asked about how about coming from an operations and project management background? Does that transfer over successfully?
Yeah, I've seen some of my program managers turn into product managers. So I think because usually in a tech company, or I'm not sure what industry you're working in or like in most of the industry, like the project managers deal with a lot of stakeholders. So they're really usually really good at managing stakeholders, and project managers have to keep track of the timeline very well, and to make sure that the project move along at a right speed so we can achieve the milestones, right? So all of those are very valuable skill sets for PM to have, even though we don't really have to do those jobs like directly. But like all of the skill sets in terms of working with multiple stakeholders, keeping the milestone in mind when planning things, and the roadmap is really important. So the only thing, if you feel like your in terms of your experience is lacking, is working on strategy and vision, and thinking about building things from iteration or like from conceptualization. Then potentially, like in your experience, you can view like, oh, have you been part of any projects like that? Have you been part of any projects that build product like from or feature from scratch? Have you contributed ideas to that project? So that could be something that you could add on your resume as well. And I definitely think that the having the operations and project management background is a good asset to have, and it's a big advantage to make the transition.
Mhm. Wonderful. For someone who has no experience, and when they're applying for the job, I know you mentioned, yes, working on these side projects. Anything else to make them stand apart when they're putting together their resume? And is it a portfolio that would also make them stand out? Yeah, any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I think side projects will help build the resume, right? But in the case you feel like getting a lot of side project already and you're not getting the call from recruiters, then it's another problem, right? So it's about getting through to the company and getting the interview. So I find it still very helpful to reach out to people directly, to network and talk to people. Like get the resume reviewed by experienced PMs, by potential hiring managers who's also on the lookout for candidates. So LinkedIn is a very useful resource to code out to make like code outreach to people. So I know it can be a hit and miss sometimes because there are so many people out there and people are busy. But believe me that people are willing to help if they have the time. So just reach out to as many people as you find any like connection or similarity with your background. You can reach out to 10 people and maybe even just two people reply, then that also a success, right?
Mhm.
Then get the people review the resume, get their feedback, and then also try to build a network with those people if they can get a referral to the job. So usually referral can help a little bit more than just applying online and just sending the resume kind of like blindly to all the companies. So I think build out the network can also help in the long term. So even if the company that the people that you're talking to is not hiring right now, they might hire very soon in the future. Or if the person that you talk to, like right now, they cannot help, but in the future, if they move to another company, then there might be opening in the new company as well. So yeah, another thing as a PM, I think can be very useful is to build out your network. It's not only useful for the job hunting part, but also help with exchanging knowledge and intel in different companies and learn from different PMs best practices.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to ask, like, is there something like a pre-PM role, something that you can do even within the department where you can just get your feet wet, and because maybe you're on the fence about whether or not you even want to go for a PM role?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. If they're already in the company where there are many PMs, the easiest thing to understand the role and then just to see if they even like it is to shadow a PM. And usually people will be willing to do that. But now I know that it's harder in a digital world where we cannot just like follow the person around, but like can only like attend all of the meeting that the person in can also like be very helpful. And you see like, oh, like what exactly the PM like day-to-day work looks like, and how the PM deals with certain things in meetings, and how the stakeholders interact, or what kind of questions, what kind of challenges that PMs have to face with on a daily basis. So shadowing someone like who already have experience can give very good insight. And then uh, another part about like when you're already in the team in the company and you have a good relationship with your manager, um, share with the manager the aspiration that you want to make a career change eventually one day to a PM role, and be proactive. So identify the skill set that you already have right now in your current job, and identify like the skill set that you need to build to make the transition. So a good manager will help you to identify opportunities to close the gap. But I understand that sometimes it's not that easy to have the conversation with a manager because they might think that, oh, we are leaving the role eventually. So getting someone like similar to like maybe a PM mentor within the company to give you some insight can be super helpful, because the person's already in the company. They can also help give you advice on what potential opportunity you can take on, or how you can approach the project differently to gain more PM skills that you've identified that right now you don't have and you want to build. So yeah, I think those can be the first few steps that you can take to see how you can get those experience in, and gradually and see if you kind of like that PM work more than what you're currently doing.
Mhm. Is it possible to uh, just kind of say to you, like, hey, I really aspire to what you're doing, and is there any like small tiny tasks that you can assign to me or give me the opportunity to try out? Does that work in your world?
Oh, I think it will be a little bit difficult to just like ask people to assign tasks. Yeah, I'm not thinking about it that way. I'm more like thinking about it like, oh, so here are like the kind of skills that I'm liking, but here like this is my job description. That this is what I'm doing right now, right? So let's say this person is currently in finance, for example, like just working with a lot of data and number and have nothing to do with PM, but now I really want to break into PM's role. Then mentor inside a company, they can identify like, oh, these are the projects that that will kind of help you to get more exposure into a PM role. And there are some projects where like the finance can really drive the conversation. So kind of try to be in the room of those projects, right? Where those conversations happen, and see what kind of finance person can drive and can change the perspective. Like for example, like for projects or feature related to payment, or like to like the revenue structure program related to the end customers, for example, like the finance person definitely has a lot more say, and can be more proactive in helping the PM. So it's just like about the level of involvement that we can and what we want to have in the kind of projects to get to the skill set that we want to have in the future, right?
Now, this question, I'm not familiar with the terminology, but this person has passed the PMP exam, and also they have experience with collecting and transferring requirements. Does that make sense to you, the what she's trying to explain there?
Uh, I'm not as familiar with the PMP certificate,
Mhm.
but I think the what you just described to me, like in terms of like translating the requirement, like from customers and talking to engineering team, that's definitely something that we do on a daily basis as well. But it's not just the main part, right? So um, for the certificate, like anything that has any relevancy to the job description, definitely highlight them in the resume and definitely talk about them in interviews to make sure that people understand that like these are the important skill sets that I can contribute to the team
Mhm.
when if I'm hired to this position.
Okay. Yeah, so they can definitely highlight that this is something that they already know how to do, and that they can start from that place and see what else they can have more additional responsibilities that they can take on from that place forward.
Yeah.
Alrighty. And then I for boot camp, does is that a valid path into a PM role? Does it is that helpful? I know I understand it's where we can where there could be it's the beginning of some networking that can begin with getting to know the right people and asking good questions and seeing where you can move next. So for boot camp, do you feel like you've seen successful transitions from someone coming out of boot camp into a PM role?
So a boot camp is similar to like a short-term training program, right? Like for
Mhm.
example, like product school, training program for PMs. Yeah, so I've seen people who've done that and transition into PM role. But I think the most important thing is that on the training or boot camp will give you some kind of framework to start with. And they might help land you with some more like practical projects, but having the experience by working on like an internship, working on a side project is gonna help significantly. So yeah, I think they are best when combined together to break into a PM role. Like it can be challenging to just have one and not the other. So when a person looking for a full-time job with a boot camp, after the boot camp they can also look for a part-time job like for like a side project in the meantime, to kind of just build out the product experience, and then make the resume stronger. But yeah, I think bootcamp by itself will help, but will be much better if combined with some side project or some kind of internship or some yeah experience to tell on the resume.
Yeah. Awesome. I think this is probably going to be the last question coming up. It's around a mentor relationship, whether it be you feel like you now maybe you're at the place you're mentoring some people, or that you're building your people who mentor you. How are there suggestions for us all for building this mentor relationship?
Yeah, and I think any person at any stage in the career can always mentor somebody and can be a mentee to someone else, right? So I look at the mentorship as a win-win relationship where if I offer to mentor somebody, I can also learn from that person as well. So it doesn't mean that like oh so when people go and approach and talk and find a mentor they always feel like oh I'm asking for help. So I think it's better to come in that conversation with the mindset that I have something to offer and I'm asking for this in return, so that we can build a win-win relationship in the future, right? So for me, right now, I'm also looking for mentor, but I'm also like very open to mentor other people. So I've done that in my past job as well, and I want to continue to do that for people who want to break in product management, want to get a junior role, or want to just get advice on like changing product career, or like changing from startup to big corporation. And then in the return, I can also learn from the people as well. And as I aspire to step in a senior product leader role, then I'm also having a mentorship relationship with people who are more senior than me and see how they get to where they are right now. So I think the best way to get started and to find a mentor is to identify what kind of mentor you want to have, and what kind of people would be more helpful for your career right now, and then what things you can offer for that mentorship relationship. And then once you identify that list, you can reach out to people on LinkedIn, reach out to people on email, or like on the website, on Twitter. Um, Go and ask, and then a lot of time people are willing to do so. So just come in the mentorship with an open mind, and have a clear agenda, so that it's efficient in terms of time. Whenever you meet, you have something to chat about.
Mhm. Okay, well, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Nok, for being here and spending this time with us, sharing so many wisdoms. I will definitely come back to rewatch, to study up on all the things that you shared with us. I can't think. So happy that we got reconnected once again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, reach out if anyone needs any help from each other. We're here to be on the same team. And so, yeah, reach out to Nocto. And also, I'm Katie Mason. So, thank you so much. And I'm going to sign off now. I hope
Yeah.
you have a nice day, nice weekend, wherever you are.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Keep in touch. Bye.